Let's cross now live to Washington, D.C., where our senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim is standing by for us. Mike, thank you for joining us here on the I-24 News Desk. What's the latest coming out of Washington?
Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer meeting this morning with Secretary of State Tony Blinken. He'll head over to the White House this afternoon for meetings with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, National Security Council point man for the Middle East Brett McGurk, and Biden Energy Envoy Amos Hochstein to talk about a number of issues depending on the particular audience. Number one, Dermer took this job in the government of Benjamin Netanyahu in order primarily to push across the finish line a normalization agreement with the Saudis. That was issue number one for him. Issue number two, though not a distant far behind, was the Iranian issue. So he's trying to make progress on this particular issue here, and there are so many conflicting wants and needs and red lines for all of the parties involved here, trying to sort out what Washington wants, which is a foreign policy achievement, something that Joe Biden is severely lacking in right now. The Saudis trying to get weapons packages from the Americans in a civilian uranium enrichment program. Well, many in the Democratic Party of Joe Biden say that's a non-starter for them. They don't trust the Saudis with that level of equipment and uranium enrichment. Meanwhile, the Saudis and some of the Democratic Party want more for the Palestinians in an Israeli-Saudi normalization. That's a no-go for the current Israeli government. So Dermer trying to play a balancing act here and lay out on the table what he feels is the best path going forward, and obviously a trusted confidant of Benjamin Netanyahu. He can relay the prime minister's concerns and desires out on the table and be representative of this Israeli government during a very tense time here in the relationship between Washington and Jerusalem.
Now, jumping into that, Mike, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been deeply critical of the latest U.S.-Iranian understanding. Would Israeli figures likely stop voicing this criticism over U.S. assistance with a Saudi normalization deal? Does one hold more weight over the other?
Not necessarily so, and we've even heard from Israeli officials, look, if you sign some sort of defense pact here between the U.S. and the Saudis and guarantee American involvement again in the Middle East, American protection in the Middle East, then there's no need for a civilian enrichment program for the Saudis, which means there's no need for an enrichment program for the Iranians, which means you can turn the tables back on Tehran. Obviously, that's a very complex, multi-layered project there for the Israelis to try to convince the Americans of here. Yes, it's been a long, long time now that Jerusalem has been critical of the Americans' approach to the Iranian issue, especially when you're dealing with the Democrats. And this is something Ron Dermer has plenty of experience with. Remember, he was the former ambassador here to the United States and was involved in getting Benjamin Netanyahu in front of a joint session of Congress to deeply criticize the Obama administration over the Iranian issue. So this has been a long-standing issue for Jerusalem, no different today. But again, it's not only the Iranian issue to deal with here. Many more developments, including tensions and violence in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. You also have the judicial reforms going on in Israel, which have complicated the relationship here with the Biden administration. So 4 or 5 issues on the table here for Dermer on this trip. It's not just about the Iranians anymore.
And Mike, just briefly, some hold that this delegation is trying to mend fences between the U.S. and Israel, especially between the political figures in charge. Could Ron Dermer be trying to test the waters here before Benjamin Netanyahu does visit Washington, but not necessarily the White House?
Certainly so. You know, you always send somebody, and Dermer obviously has high stature within the Netanyahu government, but you always send somebody to kind of dip their toes in the water here, figure out exactly where things stand at the moment, figure out where points of agreement are. Remember, we talk so much about the areas of disagreement between Washington and Jerusalem with these current governments, Biden and Netanyahu. There are points of agreement. There are points of where both sides can move forward. I think that might be what Dermer might be trying to test out today, is where can we actually find agreement.